We're absolutely going to use the previous recording from all of what just happened. The melee
That's the whole podcast.
that
It's
was
just us
I mean, who would
checking
like that?
sound.
People be grateful for that.
that was a great experience. Thank you guys so much for making time to do this. And
Pleasure.
I would say you both are pivotal forces in healing culture.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's like I've now at this point listened to. I mean, music's informed I think everyone's lives so much more than we would even give credit to in general. Like it's always perfusing our worlds, whether we realize it or not, and the worlds of our parents and our teachers, and like it's so deeply entrenched in who we are. So even if you think you're not a musician or musically inclined, like you still are music.
Yeah, it's true. And from as early as I can remember, music was the thing that would, like, as a child crying, that was the thing my mum would put on to keep me quiet. She'd put on Beethoven. Apparently that was my thing when I was like
Beethoven.
1 year old. And I remember, like, some of my earliest memories are we had quite big speakers in the lounge of my house. My dad bought these things, and I can remember even then being able to sort of see sound.
Like
not
synesthetically?
Not quite like that. More a closed eye thing, but you know, certain instruments had certain shapes, and it's just always been like that. So something physical, something dimensional was happening.
How do you experience that now?
It's kind of the same.
Imagery, in a sense?
In a way, but not uncontrollably. So it's a way, it's almost like a piece of music is a room, a dimensional space, and it's easy to place things within that, which is actually kind of how it is once you...
Do you feel synesthetic about music? Like, I know Pharrell says he does.
So by that, does that actually mean that, say, Pharrell, does he see colours for
Yeah,
sounds?
that's what he says.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so that
it's shifting senses in a sense.
That's what he says.
That's what he says. It sounds cool.
I mean, I would enjoy that, but that
Yeah.
not what happens. It's more of a... It's really hard to explain. I've not heard anyone else put it any better because they haven't been me. But
Yeah.
basically, it's as if sounds are shapes, and yeah, I don't know.
Do you think that's a special gift to you that it's informed your process as a musician, or do you think anyone has access to that?
I'm sure lots of people do. I think it's probably a musician thing in particular, but I'm sure lots of other people have a similar thing. I just haven't heard it described, but it's what I've always used to navigate, like, how to mix and place sounds.
Yeah.
So, and I equate it with, because I have perfect pitch, so I can tell you what note things are and play along with things without having practiced and things like that. And that was all there from birth. It wasn't something that came in. And so there is something in the brain that's, for some reason, able to identify pitch in some people. And
Do you have perfect pitch with, like, chordal structures? Like, if I played a whole chord, you could go just be like, this is the chord.
if it was a chord that was reasonable, if it was a chord that was highly unreasonable with loads of
Yeah.
clusters, it would take me a little while to figure it out. But like, if it's a recognizable chord, yeah, I could definitely do that. But
Wow.
I feel like you can do that too. Earlier, you were
I can find it, but I noticed you can, like, if I play a note or sing a note, you could say that's an F sharp.
Yeah.
I'd be guessing. I could find it on the keyboard very quickly.
Yeah.
That's different.
But it is weird that some brains just, and I don't call it a skill. It's not something I learned, and it's not something that I, had to fight for in any way. It's like saying that's red. I just know it's A.
So that must drive you crazy if you were on a keyboard and you hit a transpose button and you're playing, but it's playing different notes.
Yeah, I can't. I'd play the wrong notes.
It
I'd
screw you
adapt,
up.
but it would be very difficult. Yeah.
Wow.
But just don't.
That's not normal.
I wonder.
That's
y'all's
exceptional, I should say.
So you guys come at music from such a more like intrinsic mathematic, like you were like deeply entrenched in the mechanics and the structure of building music, whereas I'm not at all. So I love just hearing you guys going back and forth and just like talking shop.
But at the end of the day, I think it's totally about feeling. I
Yeah.
mean, yes, there are mechanics to it for sure, but it's like you've been saying how you can't explain necessarily the process other than you just kind of do it, and I vibe that too because it just sort of unfolds by like there was this great line that some writer had like. When does inspiration strike? He's like, at 10 a.m. when I sit down to write every day. It's like you just have to show up. And, I mean, some days are better than others, but it's not like, oh, I've learned certain things and now therefore I can make a piece in a certain way. It just kind of does its thing. It's a kind of repetition in a way.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think like the idea of being taught composition. I went to music college at the weekends when I was a teenager, like at the same time as regular school, and the piano lessons were amazing because I really believe that being taught finger technique is not something. I'm generally an autodidact in music, but when it comes to piano, you need someone to show you how to train your muscles in your hand. It's like a training in it's more of a physical thing in a way.
I didn't get that, but I wish I did.
It's useful
I
because
should-
when
definitely
I
would
improvise
be.
on the piano, I can do things I wouldn't have been able to do. But when I went to the composition lessons, I was just like, this is not for me because I want to just try and fail and try and fail. And obviously that's how you write music. You just make as much of it as you can, and after several decades, hopefully it becomes quite
Comes your
acceptable.
thing, yeah.
I wonder if I can. So the lens that I'm really interested with music is how it affects us in mental, emotional level, and a cellular level, and the way that we, the way that we produce ourselves. Like a sound comes on in the room, there could be a bang, somebody could drop a glass and could break, and that would be a sound that you can incorporate into some symphony or soundtrack or whatever it would be, and it would invoke a sensation. And so your cells would shift, and cortisol would spike, and norepinephrine, and your amygdala would do a thing, and like your whole body contorts to essentially fit that sound, which I just think is so cool that you're able to DJ people's endocrinology with the way that you're producing your different levels of music.
Yeah,
And
that's cool.
It's like being a drug pusher of sorts. It's
it's
like
completely that.
We are made of drugs. There's no
I don't-
avoiding
I
that.
don't do drugs. I am drug. I mean, I do drugs as well, but
I both do and
do them
am.
all day long. Internally.
all of it.
Both do and am and will.
But I wonder within that, is that something you notice with things like just the tone and pitch of someone's voice? Do you hear that as music, and do you hear it in
I've noticed that with if I take a strong dislike to someone's voice, it's often a sign to me perhaps that we won't get on.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, and like in particular romantic relationships, I have to be attracted to the voice as much as, and I'm sure that's
The speaking voice.
yeah, absolutely, yeah. I don't demand a level of singing.
Like,
I will not accept
hear-
anything less
let me
than
hear Happy
full
Birthday.
opera,
Yeah.
full opera training. No, just I have to really love the sound, because I'm a very auditory.
That would be amazing though if you made them sing like "Twinkle Twinkle Little Star" and they
Yeah.
finish. You're like, this isn't gonna
It's not
work.
gonna work.
This is not
Next.
gonna work.
I actually had that one time. I was doing a ballet thing. I've done 2 ballets, no big deal. And one time they had me in front of the class
Yeah.
sing some song, see if I could have the chops to sing, and it was pretty embarrassing. Bad, tough experience. I think I sang Happy Birthday.
quite
something
brutal.
Happy
in
Birthday is a
front of
difficult
whole
song to
class.
sing.
Yeah, people
It's-
were in
yeah.
tutus the whole thing. It wasn't good. It wasn't a good experience. It's challenging.
Sounds like a nightmare.
Yeah, it was tough.
Are you okay?
I'm recovering. I could feel my sphincters clench up a little bit as I was telling that story. So there's still some trouble within it. Another thing that I think is within that, I think it's the fact that we are always we're like tuning each other with sound essentially. And I think that culturally people are maybe I can only speak for myself. I spend a lot of time in my head. I think probably most people probably resonate with that concept. And there's something about music, it's almost acts as like this bridge into the subconscious. And then you get all this information behind that. I wonder, do you guys have any tools or practices or something that's been resourceful or supportive for you to open yourself up into that place to allow the music to come through as opposed to forcing the message?
Yeah, for me it was, the various things that are in my daily practice have helped most. I mean, transcendental meditation I would credit as the single most important thing in freeing up the process of letting go of control whilst at the same time having the skill to control it when you need to. It's a complicated thing to explain, but that's how I feel about it now, and something about the openness that follows a meditation like that. I always notice that, so after I finish TM and just immediately just play something on the piano. It's the first thing that comes out will be something that, you could do an A-B situation, like let's record something without that, and then after that, and you would hear the difference. And something about connecting or transcending in that time. And then, of course, all the different psychedelics have enormous effects on really the inspiration and the connection to forces greater than yourself. And I think like keeping going back to that as often as possible, not psychedelics, but just the general thing of things bigger than yourself, being open to those things coming into the music. That's for me the sort of primary way, I would say.
What do you think it is about the psychedelics? Because there's a lot of brilliant musicians that have used and not used psychedelics.
Yeah, and I know some people who make the most psychedelic music and art who've never touched a single one. I think there are some people that don't need it and some people that benefit from it. And, I've always sought that kind of experience. My consciousness has always been curiousness. I would always, even from a teenager, first discovering cannabis and going quite deep into that. It's like, this is definitely something I am interested in, and like opened whole worlds to me. Whereas I know people that just sat there and made that stuff without it. And I'm kind of at peace with the fact that, some people need it, some people don't. Immediately just play something on the piano. It's the first thing that comes out will be something that, you could do an A-B situation, like let's record something without that, and then after that, and you would hear the difference. And something about connecting or transcending in that time. And then, of course, all the different psychedelics have enormous effects on really the inspiration and the connection to forces greater than yourself. And I think like keeping going back to that as often as possible, not psychedelics, but just the general thing of things bigger than yourself, being open to those things coming into the music. That's for me the sort of primary way, I would say.
What do you think it is about the psychedelics? Because there's a lot of brilliant musicians that have used and not used psychedelics.
Yeah, and I know some people who make the most psychedelic music and art who've never touched a single one. I think there are some people that don't need it and some people that benefit from it. And, I've always sought that kind of experience. My consciousness has always been curiousness. I would always, even from a teenager, first discovering cannabis and going quite deep into that. It's like, this is definitely something I am interested in, and like opened whole worlds to me. Whereas I know people that just sat there and made that stuff without it. And I'm kind of at peace with the fact that, some people need it, some people don't. I think almost now, actually, as I retreat a little bit from the stronger ones, that it's like the message is in there enough. I've had enough of those experiences that it kind of comes out anyway. And I think, again, going back to TM, I think that reinforces that.
Yeah.
Just that connection, the inner connection that Ram Dass talks about on our track.
Yeah.
I wonder how do you guys inform each other's music? Working together, what is that? I'm sure both of you probably see each other as...
I'm self-conscious when you say that. I could speak at length, but he, informs mine. But like,
I'm sure you guys are informing. Maybe in other ways outside of just strictly production of music, but I'm sure you guys are informing each other.
Yeah, we are. I mean,
quite a
we made a piece of music together that I absolutely love, and it wouldn't exist exactly as it is without all the elements that we both brought. It's a true union of styles and sounds, and I'm so glad that it exists. It's amazing.
I guess you can't not influence anytime you're throwing things into the ring together. So, but it's cool too. Like you recognize anytime you just get deeper in any artist's world, a musician or otherwise, it rubs off on you, right? And so, what was really interesting on this was like I knew John's music before I knew John, so I see it from the outside, and it has that influence. But when you see it from the inside, where I basically is like, I mean, what a treat to say. Here's an element, and it's my voice in this case, and then he puts now it goes from the back door back into like what I'm used to hearing, and I'm like, oh, that's how some of those things happen. It's like, it's so illuminating for me, and so cool, and I get to learn like kind of how the sausage is made a little bit, and it's like
it's funny how that expression 'Cause it's quite an amazing. Like, it's a very useful expression, but simultaneously it's extremely unpleasant.
It's like my car. My car apparently smells like sausage.
I was going to
Circling
say
back.
though, it's not as simple as like you follow a certain recipe and then you get the result, because it's not. You know, it's an art that's ineffable. But it was illuminating and just amazing to see that process by being a part of it, I guess is my point. Because then you really get to see it from another angle. That is, I mean, it's priceless, really, to do that. And even if we were just friends and you still might not have that experience of like having that creative angle. And that really is a unique opportunity, because I have many friends friends with that are musicians, and we just haven't had the opportunity or to work like that.
What do you think you've learned from East?
Well, so I first encountered his music in 2018, and so I'd been helping out, advise on the playlist for the Imperial College London were using for psilocybin trials for depression. And my friend Dr. Rosalind Watts invited me to maybe consult a little bit on things that could be included, and she'd included one of Krishna's tracks. And
Krishna and East are synonymous.
Yes.
By the way.
Yes. We have many options for names.
Take your pick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was actually thinking before meeting you, like, what name shall I?
I know that's the problem. But I mean,
Yeah.
it's just as if you had a band name, I guess.
Yeah.
It'd be cool if your band name was Johns Hopkins, just to really fuck with people.
That would. Yeah. A thought for the future. But anyway, so I heard this track on the playlist, and it really stood out because it had a great deal of rawness and personality, and it had a wolf on it as well, which I was super into, like right at the end. And I love field recordings, and it was deeply evocative. And so when we started working together, we were introduced by a mutual musician friend, and we started working on this track. And I just asked him to send me a bunch of things, basically just start something, because I think that's a great way in a collaboration to start without much thought. And well, not much thought on my part anyway. You have to do the work at the beginning. And then he planted the seed for this track with these incredible vocal harmonies that were sitting in what he'd made. And I just kind of ran with that, and that's kind of, it all flowed from that, really. It wouldn't sound anything like it without the exact notes you chose to sing on that day were responsible for the piano that then followed. So it really was like a seed, and everything grew from that.
Well, I remember you took it into the studio, and I just got like a text that said, "Very, very, very good day in the studio."
Oh, is that what I said?
Thank God. And you basically had the track.
Yeah, I
it's
think
full shape.
it
I
kind
mean,
of
just
appeared
small
in-
changes after that.
Yeah, it kind of appeared on day one.
Yeah.
So the vocals in my head, and then Ramdas speaking, and then playing along with the talk, and as interspersing piano chords around what he was saying, in a way that was like trying to strike a balance between. He didn't want it to sound like he knew they were coming, or that there was like some actual active duet, but just where is there room for something, and just like trusting intuition on that.
Did you have a relationship of sorts with the work of Ramdas, or Ramdas personally at all?
So not personally, no. I first heard of him in, well, I mean, I don't know, maybe some time ago, but I was bought a copy of Be Here Now about 6-7 years ago, and I had it by my bed for years, this whole time actually. And that was one of the amazing things about this project, is that we got to animate the pages of that book for the video.
Yeah, and it turned out to be the 50th anniversary of the book, which I didn't know. And then he did this track, Sit Around the Fire, and then you do the video and they animate the book. It just becomes like this beautiful celebration of...
Amazing how that worked.
Because that book, I'm sure that was my doorway in to Ram Dass originally, and I know for Radha it was the same, and a lot of people. That book was powerful. Yeah.
You mentioned, what did you mention in relation to music and depression?
Yeah, so that was in much like at Johns Hopkins University over here in London, we have Imperial College doing similar trials using psilocybin to treat severe treatment-resistant depression, and obviously the playlist used for that is really important, and that kind of experiencing, like, helping out with what goes on that, and Krishna and I have talked about this quite a lot. It's just made me realize that that it would be amazing just to have a unified body of music for the whole of an experience, rather than 80 different musicians for one person's, trip. So
Right.
I think that was possibly subconsciously the genesis for this album. Yeah.
What do you think it is about music itself that's so potent with guiding a person's both psychedelic journey and just life journey in general, but it becomes more overt
Yeah,
under
it becomes
using
massively,
psychedelics? Yeah.
massively enhanced
Like
to the
you
point.
are,
Yeah.
yeah.
On ketamine, you become the music,
Yeah.
and DMT, the music shapes the room you enter, or the space you enter. I don't know. All I know is that it's inherent in humans, like you said at the beginning. Like, we are, for some reason, encoded to make and listen to and love music and sound. And
There's even separate neurons in the auditory cortex that process music
Really?
outside of like
Really?
conversation and such.
that's fucking cool.
So-
It is
Didn't know that.
amazing to think like why that's there, and you just think
Yeah.
about what music is, and it's like in this whole universe of duality, we have basically ratios of tones, of frequencies, of waves, and then rhythm, which is like playing with time.
Mm.
And you put the two together, and you have music. And then what's even crazier when you think about a basic piano, like one scale, those 12 notes, and more or less every song we've ever heard has been written on those 12 notes, which is
Right.
even
Yeah.
crazier.
Yeah.
So it's just playing with
Combination of-
patterns.
yeah.
And for some reason, like, clearly our voice is sound. It's a kind of music. It's how we convey ideas. And that even translates to how we identify with our personalities, with our running monologue in our head. It's a kind of sound, but it's a thought. But we're talking in our heads.
Mm.
So in some ways, our whole world is sound. And it's even encoded into things like our mystery stories, like God spoke,
Mm.
or the Big Bang, or
Yeah.
it's like this is a kind of reverberation, quite literally, of some original
Mm.
sound, and all the different little fractal harmonies and overtones of it. And so it really is like asking a fish what water is. It's so everywhere in our life that it's difficult to really recognize what its role and power is, because it's so disparate. And even music today is more popular and present because of things like Spotify
Sure.
on this planet than it's ever been. And we don't even step back to be like, wow, that's kind of crazy. Like, there's 40 to 60,000 songs a day added just to Spotify alone, let alone India and China and the other platforms. And what is that all about? Like, why are we making so many songs? Like,
Yep.
why?
Yeah.
And why do we enjoy them? We always want more and more
But
and more.
I think it's the modern equivalent of the fact that every single night, sitting around the fire in
Yeah.
a tribal community, someone would start drumming
Yes.
away. Maybe
it's
someone would
it's a
have
kind of
flute.
communal connection back then and
Yeah.
expression. So
And-
maybe that's the piece that we forget, is how it brings us
Yeah.
together.
It was always there, I think, and this is our version of that. And it's a little bit more isolating now because everyone's into different things, and there's headphones, and there's everyone's in their own.
But being a
houses.
fan of something is a way of having a tribe.
Yes,
in a way,
and going
you
to
know.
shows. It's so
Yeah.
nice to be able to go to shows again and to perform again and do things, do things with shared energies, shared resonance, people, and yeah, it's essential. It's for some reason like that's so cool. I didn't know that there were specific neurons that were there for that.
Yeah, I think music is like the human body has these certain mechanical, physiological symptoms or expressions when it feels away. Like the composition of tears is vastly different than that of like if you chopped an onion up. There's all these hormones and all this stuff in tears if you're like really crying, or you feel sad.
Yeah.
And so you look at somebody just the way that you would, it's like a fish in water. We're just like, it's water. It's a sound everywhere. Someone cries or laughs. You're like, yeah, cool person crying, laughing, totally normal. But that's the body expressing out these various different, hormones and chemicals, and it's going through its process. And I think that naturally human beings and probably definitely other animals as well are attracted to making different sounds as kind of a part of that laughing and that crying and that expressing and that processing of their story. And then it comes out into audible language, and then it literally becomes a story. I think it's actually like it's like a physiological healing tool And then if you strip that away from culture, and then it becomes, maybe this is actually a question I had for both of you. If you have, what are your thoughts of the transition away from analog into digital music, if that's even the right terminology?
Personally, I think I embrace both things. For me, like I started making music when digital was already prevalent. So I started on a computer, and digital synthesis was already there. And I never recorded bands or anything, so I haven't had so much engagement with analog. But until I think maybe it was about 10 years ago, I started working with some analog synths, and synths that were made around the year I was born, in fact. And album I made in 2013 called Immunity, like heavily focused on one synth that was made in 1979. And
Which synth?
the MS-20, Korg MS-20, which is a beautiful thing. It's quite small and like ferocious sounding, and it was the dominant sound of the lead track of that album. So I'm into the fusion of the analog and digital, I think, and a lot of my sounds, particularly on this new record, they start with analog sources. So I'll play a piano and then just effect it, process it, and do all kinds of weird things to it sonically, and that's a fusion of analog and digital as well. Yeah.
Is it Jack White? He's the lead singer of White Stripes or whatever it was. Was it?
It was, yeah.
Yeah. He, paraphrasing something that he said in relation to the analog digital transition, something along the lines of, when analog you're getting more information. You're getting like 100% of the sound, whereas you go into digital, you're getting a very small fraction of it. It's all kind of pieced together.
Yeah.
And I'm sure I'm butchering all this. I have no idea what I'm talking about. So help me at any point. But what he suggested was that it's like stressful for people at a subconscious level, because they subconsciously have to fill in all this space, as opposed to receiving like the whole food version of the sound.
Yeah.
And you can experience that, if you listen to a live musician and you like feel it like hit you in the stomach or the face or the heart or, wherever, you're like, oh, that's that sensation. That would be the whole analog experience. Yeah. Whereas if you play that same song digitally, it seems the same, but it's different.
Yeah. But that implies that it has to remain analog from start to finish of the chain. So if you listen to a White Stripes album on a CD, it is digital, which means it can be replicated in ones and zeros, and it's also a lot to do with genre, because a kind of a punky rock band, yeah, definitely, I wouldn't use any. If I was recording that band, I wouldn't use anything digital either. I would be like tape machines, but I mean, I think this kind of genre that we both work in, of electronic music, it embraces what's possible with both. And the other thing that's possibly changed even since he said that is that the quality of digital recording is now up to such a level that it captures all those so what he's talking about, the things that possibly would get cut out, are called overtones and harmonics and frequencies that are perhaps more things that you feel than things that you can hear. Now the digital world has advanced to the point where you can in fact capture all of that stuff, and there are software add-ons that almost reduce that again, because we want it to sound.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of at this moment in time a pretty beautiful hybrid.
Yeah.
And almost everyone's in a hybrid situation because it's so good now.
Yeah.
That like the emulations are incredible. It's still fun, and a lot of people use hardware, but analog gear, and I do. But just to say that like the digital really has gotten so good that it's kind of like crazy. I think the main reason, if you wanted to go full analog, is more you like the process. And it does create a lot of limitations, but also a lot of cost. I think Jack White's studio, they have like straight to lathe, like you're recording straight to record.
That is traditional.
Which is like, I mean, there's you're mixing that live, that's it. And that's an old school process, but I think we like to manipulate, and there's so many cool things you can do now. And a lot of them emulate old school techniques. Jack's studio also has a radio transmitter, like a really low level FM, so he can check his mixes in the car, I heard. Which, he's got to work in the car over FM.
I like the fact that, because a lot of people used to burn CDs to test in the car,
right.
to actually transmit it to your car.
Yeah, exactly. It's
cool.
like a certain degradation of the audio over FM. He's got to see if it's got that touch.
But then that's already digital.
Yeah.
I've heard, like, there's value in everybody. There's value in old people, value in young people, and old people can teach young people the things that don't change, and young people can teach old people the things that do. And I wonder if
That's
there's
good.
some relationship between that digital and analog. You know, like that just like feel like I'm still in question of whether there's like a more whole food version of sound versus like a supplemental.
Real life. I mean, that's the
Yeah,
difference. It's like
acoustic in a room
it's
with
just like
someone. That's
there's nothing like seeing someone perform in a room versus a recording.
What do you think it is
It's
about
the energy. I think there's an actual
Yeah.
energy transference like that's beyond just the sound. It's
that? What does that mean?
like I can feel you in this room. I can't explain what it is, but yeah, I can
Does it feel like
I can feel
sausage?
everybody in this room. Yeah,
you smell like sausage. You don't feel like sausage.
just beef jerky.
I don't know you well enough to feel you and to detect whether you feel like a sausage or not.
But that's why I think like we were talking about Peter Broderick earlier,
Yeah.
and he had a funny line where we were talking about AI produced music, and he said he thought he could give those robots a run for their money, and it's like, but I think he's right. Like, it may be at some point in the future AI creates recordings that are interesting, but you'll never have that replaced in a live space. You just never will. I think it's a human desire and condition to want to see another human being and
Yeah.
see something created in front of them that's
Yeah.
ephemeral and shared in the room. It's been happening forever. It will continue to happen forever.
Yeah,
If
and
anything, we'll want that more as we move forward.
I totally agree with that last statement and all the previous ones. But basically, so I'm a DJ as well, and I sometimes play raves, and that's one of the reasons I'm over here in America to play some like quite big kind of dance music shows. And that is an area that could easily already you could feed in the kind of things I DJ to some sort of AI, and it could probably produce a set quite similar with different artists, different tracks, whatever. But people they do want to see a performance, and yeah, you could replace everything with robots, but what's the point? Like we still want to see people do things, and we want to feel them do things, and we want to have like a communal shared experience of music, and a robot up there is not gonna. It's the reason it hasn't taken off. Definitely doable already, no question.
What is when you are DJing like a massive crowd, are you orchestrating are you in real time reading what they're doing as like a whole organism?
No,
or are you kind of in your own, you got your sound and you're just going to do what you do?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm not. I've only been DJing for about five or 6 years. It wasn't my primary type of performance. Some DJs read the room and adapt. I'm more of a sort of right. I'm going to lead this, and you're going to come this way. That's just the type of DJ I am. So then it's up to me to do that really well so that it works. I'm not saying I'd succeed, but that is what I aim to do. It's like this is because also I think people that come if you didn't start out as a DJ and you become a DJ later, people that come to see you DJ expect to hear the kind of thing that's in the same world as what you write. Right. So they come for what I'm doing anyway. You know, they don't come for like a freak out jazz set or something. One day, maybe.
I'd like to see that though.
Are you the same with that?
I don't DJ, but
when you're playing to an audience.
It depends on the show. Like my performances range from true medicine ceremonies, which typically aren't like a public ticketed thing, where it's 100% improvised, and I don't see that as a performance. That's really just like you're there in service to just play from the heart and see what happens. To some kind of set on the other end of the spectrum that is highly regimented on how long it needs to be and what that audience is and so forth, and maybe you need a very detailed set, and it's probably 90% what you planned. But I like it to have as much room in the moment to say, like, I'm really feeling like such and such wants to happen. Now, maybe that's an improvisation, or maybe that's like this song needs to be reinvented, or this one should keep going and get bigger based on what's going on. So I like to lean into that because I think then I'm meeting the moment as opposed to me enforcing the moment on the room. But to be honest, I mean, I always have a set and I always rehearse. And so what I'm trying to rehearse lately is that flexibility. It's almost like don't play it exactly the same every time, because then I'll just get up there and get nervous and just do it. And it's fine. That's good. But I know that like my edge is like, how free can I get? and I played a concert. It's the one I sent you.
Mm.
It was just for friends. So maybe that's why the freedom was there. But I was more nervous because it was just a few friends in a room, this beautiful piano, and I had no plan. But that's what I wanted to try. And so it was this weird mixture of a performance or a ceremony, I don't know. And I just played for a while. And all I asked them, I said, if you could please just give me your attention fully, I really feel like that will help me feel safe to just what I might fall on my face here. I was afraid it would be incredibly boring, or I don't know. And it felt really in this pocket of just flow. And where does that come from? I felt like it came from them. Because when I was rehearsing for it, it was not flowing. It just felt like I don't know. There's something about that when you open yourself up, But that's not always what's called for. But when it can be magic. What you played at the end of the concert the other night, he did an improvisation that he didn't know he was going to do, and he probably just said, "I'll just play it and see what happens." But I was there, and it really felt the same thing. Like everyone was just feeding him, and it was 6 minutes of just magic.
Yeah.
It was a really amazing experience, actually, because I haven't played piano in front of anyone since last show was Sydney Opera House, January 2020. That was like, and I went on stage with no plan. I played 20 minutes of piano improvisation and then went into the techno stuff.
And did it feel, and when it locks in like that, it's an amazing feeling.
Yeah, I've just, it's funny because like I was sort of traumatized when it came to piano playing because I did this classical training and I did some big concerts as a 16-year-old and I got super freaked out by the level of stress that came with that. And I didn't play the piano in front of an audience from age of 16 to about 30, which is really sad. Yeah. And then I gradually started to bring it back into occasional shows when there was one there. And then I decided to fully embrace it again in the last few years, and I've done lots of piano stuff. And then last night it was just like, it felt like such a safe, receptive audience after, your set and my album was played, and everyone was just, they were right there with us, and it just felt so safe to just go on and yeah. So I really feel like that came from everyone.
You could feel it. It felt like it was feeding you.
Amazing.
And that shows the role of the audience.
Yeah.
And that concert was in the round, so people are in these concentric circles, and it kind of inherently, its structure of it is sort of saying to people, like, you have a role in this, and you're feeding energy into the stage, as opposed to your traditional proscenium where people are in the audience and someone's on the stage. There's a separation. And I like this idea of active participation as the listener. Like, what does it mean to actively listen versus to passively listen, which is almost like a victim listening versus like a participant listening. And
I would never want someone to describe
the ticket holder as
one
victim.
of our shows as I describe it as a victim listening.
That's probably not the best choice of words, but anyway, I thought it was.
I was a victim of his
Let me make it a more positive. It was a kind of invitation that was set in the room, and people, I think they naturally meet the moment because they want to. They want something deeper. They just have to know, how do we do this?
I think sometimes it's interesting, you, Krishna, that you're unapologetic about demanding attention.
I'm just needy that way. Yeah,
That's
I know.
fine. You're a musician.
I
get very. It's very. I mean, look, I've gone through some really horrible shit over the years when I was starting out. I really had to hustle, and like I had to learn the hard way what I needed. And I've had to deal with all the stuff, and it can be one person in the room right in front of you with their back turned to you, drunk on their phone, and there's hundreds of other people, and now it's just like an energy drain, and you just want to. And I've said sometimes, like, it's like you could kick someone out or be like, I've seen it happen. Shows I've attended to. They stop a show, like, you need to go. I'm not performing till this person like leaves, and they kick them out. And it's sort of like, I think there's a fierceness that needs to be demanded for, like, I need some basic thing. It's basic. And it's crazy that we have to ask for that these days. But I find that, almost everyone's just 100% down. It's like, it's that invitation.
It's something you have to earn that, for sure. But
it's like you're integrating the body.
Yeah. I think we need to be come into the space and have people say, like, we can go a little deeper. It's like when you invite people in a room, you have to say, like, this is what we're going to do. Otherwise, people like stay in certain guarded spaces. And so when I sort of start out and kind of set the stage, so to speak, to say, like, this is what maybe we could do together, and like I think it helps them step into that space.
I think I get this sensation sometimes going to some type of like show or presentation. I'll have this underlying itch of like, I would like to perform. I would like to dance. I want to like do something.
You do your ballet thing.
I want to do my ballet
tutu
thing, or embarrass myself singing in front of all the girls.
You could
but
do that.
I think it's such an interesting perspective that feels, I don't know, like reassuring in a way that we're all a part of the broader body. And just because you're not the mouthpiece in the moment doesn't mean that you're not supportive or a conduit of sorts, or some resource for the sound that comes out. And so as an audience I think that's a really important differentiation, like an active audience member versus passive, or a victim.
I love that.
I'm so sorry for saying
Don't be
that.
sorry. It's funny.
No, I get it. Though. But I think it's like, everyone doesn't need to be an entrepreneur. Everyone doesn't need to be a CEO. Everyone doesn't need to be the boss. Everyone, but we have these mixed messages in society that's like, you got to be the king. You got to be the boss. And it's like, no, you don't. Like you need to be. You don't need to be anything, really.
Sometimes you just need to be held.
But yeah, you just need a hug, man.
You just need a hug. Sometimes you just need a nice cold beer and a hug. I'm just talking about myself.
How has music been supportive for you on an emotional level, John?
I think it's more like I need it to survive. And I don't mean financially. I mean, like, it is absolutely crucial. We were talking about this earlier. Like, I had this realization that I can't not do it, because that is how I make sense of things. So whatever is going on in my life, or the bigger picture of the world, which of course has got increasingly hectic and dangerous, if I go in there and make something meaningful, something that sounds good, something that works, then I immediately start to remember the bigger picture, to zoom out again and to feel good. It just gives me a boost of positivity, which I'm then able to, not just through the music, but just through my mood, then translate to other people and transmit to other people. And so yeah, like, it's, this album, this new album is really was my way of surviving. I mean, it's been something I think been building up to my whole life, for sure. It's definitely the deepest album I've made, but it was my way of surviving some of the hardest months of my life, through a combination of a really difficult heartbreak with a global pandemic in the middle of winter and everything being shut and not being able to see anyone. It just saved me, and there's so much light coming through that now I get to share with people. So, I've accepted the fact that I'm unusual in this way, and I need certain things in order to be okay. And we all have our equivalents of that, but I'm kind of trying to love that about myself now and just go, that is my place here. That's what I'm primarily supposed to be doing.
How do you gather yourself enough to come to the point to be able to produce something beautiful out of that?
It just happens. That's where it gets tricky to explain. I mean, there's obviously the meditation and there's things that are in my life, but I feel like it would just be happening anyway. I just, that's something that's been there since birth. It just comes. I have to do it. I have to sit there.
You're not waiting for inspiration to strike.
No. I mean, it doesn't.
There's a regularity.
Generally, it's like I go into the studio and I play and I respond to the first sound I hear. Usually something, or maybe I might be working with someone and record some guitar from someone, and that will trigger something. But you've got to do something or nothing will happen.
Yeah.
And as a rule, there's very few exceptions. Occasionally, like once or twice ever, I'll have an idea in the street and I'll be like, fuck, I've got to get this down. But generally it happens when I'm in there intentionally doing something. And it doesn't really matter what time that is.
Yeah.
You didn't ask what time it was. It's just
10 a.m.
Have you gone through bouts such as that where you just feel completely worthless?
So that I think those are times when I'm probably not doing anything. One of the reasons, like, because I have quite a conflicted relationship with touring, because I do love elements of it, and I love seeing. It's amazing. Like, I played this festival called Second Sky last weekend, and hosted by this lovely guy called Porter Robinson, who has a very dedicated fan base, and he curated the lineup. And I'd been nervous. I hadn't played for a year and a half, and it was 15,000 people or something, 2 nights, and that was like leading up to that. I was like, have I still got what it takes to do this? And until I was on stage actually doing it, there are moments where you just feel like this is preposterous. What am I doing here? How did I ever get to this position? And of course, this is the roller coaster of touring. When you come off stage, you're like, this is great. I need to keep doing this. And you have like a high and a low. And so for me, the low is an anxious moment before performing.
Me too.
Yeah, it's pretty normal, I think. That's just
Rada, my partner, she definitely knows that the day of or day before, she's like, oh, that's what's going on. I'm like, it's just kind of focusing in, and everything feels a little bit like it's sucking energy, and I'm just like, I'm just aware, but then it can be such a high afterwards.
Yeah, and the high afterwards is a dangerous thing and a great thing, but it leads you to want to stay up, basically, for me anyway, and I just want to like do things and meet people. I get in my most sociable after performing and my least sociable before. And before a show, on my own tour, I'll always have like a quiet room, which just says quiet room on it, and I go in there for like an hour and I'll do my TM and sit quietly and do lots of very, very slow breathing, and I do not want to talk to anyone. Afterwards, I'm just like, hey, how you doing? Let's say hello to literally everyone we can.
I think we're still on the high from, it's not quite been 24 hours, but I still feel it.
Do you guys feel content? Do you feel like you're good?
In life?
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
I mean, who feels like that all the time? I'm content.
How often do you feel content?
I mean, I kind of, for me, I've realized over the years that it's momentary. It's about moments. And if I'm content, like I'm enjoying myself right now, so I'm content right now.
Right.
I enjoy my food very much. I enjoy my friendships, my relationships. I love getting in the sauna, getting in the cold. We all did an ice bath this morning. Well, one of us didn't, but
Hey,
2 of the 3 of us did.
I did it yesterday.
We have to bring the competitive element into competitive wellness. It's my thing. So I get lots of pleasures, but also I'm prone to anxiety like most people, and so I wouldn't call myself content all the time. But what I am aware of and infinitely grateful of is having a job which feels meaningful and feels, some of the people I met after the show last night, there's some of the things they were saying about how the music's helped them over the years. I've been doing this for releasing albums for 21 years now, so there's a lot of back catalogue, and people, they just beautifully express the way in which it's helped them, and that is the biggest honour. That's when it just feels like, I am content.
Does performing ever feel like a drug for either of you, like an addiction?
I mean, DJing feels like an addiction for sure. Yeah,
I could imagine that. I haven't done that, but
it really is. Yeah.
I don't know. It's weird because I echo everything John just said, and it's also like you have to do the music because it's part of your mental health. Like you just kind of have to. So on one level, is it like a drug? Well, I mean, it's also just part of like something you have to do, and so it's deeply nourishing on one level, and when it becomes a career. The good of that is that in that way it helps you continue to do it because you kind of need to, and it's a day-to-day, but then that's also ends up helping you because you need to do it. I wonder, like, well, if it wasn't my job, I know I need to do this. It would be harder to do in a way because maybe other things would be. So it's a real privilege to be able to do it, and I recognize all the privilege I've had to allow me to be in this moment right now. And I mean, I can't say where the certain talents came from, just like John's perfect pitch and all his abilities, but I think what we can both be proud of is the discipline you put into it and what you do with it. It isn't easy to tour, for instance. It's fun at times, but it's a lot of hurrying up and waiting and nervousness and incredible sacrifices in your life. And
health and
and your health and
healthily.
But there's an act when you do meet how it affects even one person, that starts to feel like an act of service because we are on a fundamental level doing it because we have to, and it's like, and that's like this, you honor that fire that says I have to do this because I feel really shitty if I don't. But then it's so awesome that then that has some net benefit for one other person, if not many others. That's a true gift.
Yeah, Yeah.
You know, and so I have contentment in that. I'm like, well, thank God that like some gift that I'm able to cultivate on any level can provide any kind of sustenance and then help even a few people is like
I have to tell
a
you,
trip.
actually, I've been meaning to tell you this, but so I got a message quite soon after Sit Around the Fire came out, and it was from an amazing woman in New Zealand who'd got in touch to say that her brother had died suddenly, like a month ago, from an undetected heart problem, and and because of COVID, she hadn't been able to fly to Melbourne to go to
Oh,
the
wow.
funeral, and she said she was very blunt and like beautifully kind of precise in what she said. She just said that she hadn't really been feeling like life had any meaning, and then she heard that song, and you know, she just said, and now it just feels like there's a little meaning again. And it was a very unflowery, beautifully precise message, just conveying that, and it's like, wow, I should send it to you. Really, I mean, what an amazing thing.
Yeah, that's a lot to be grateful for.
Yeah,
I mean,
and if that's happening, you know, and a lot of people don't write those messages. They might just
Yeah.
feel it. They might be having. There's all kinds of stories going on with this, you know, with this music that we've both been making for ages. That hopefully is doing some.
Yeah, there's way more people that were probably on the edge of ending their lives that didn't tell you about it than did. Not
Sure,
that that's
I mean,
the only thing that matters.
it
No,
feels
But
like
your influence and everyone's influence is so much vaster than what we think.
Yeah,
I think
it
just
all ripples out.
walking down the street
Yeah,
and looking at somebody in the eyes.
yeah, we're exactly. We're all doing these dances together, and it's a recognition of that. I mean, it goes both ways with this co-conspiracy of awakening with everyone we interact with. And I don't know about you, but I feel like you finish a piece of music or an album, and it's sort of like, let's say it's a little boat, and you kick it out to sea, and then it's sort of doing its thing.
Mm-hmm.
And you hear these stories, and it's beautiful to hear, but it's almost like being proud of a child. They're like,
yeah,
oh, I'm so glad it's out there affecting people. It's like I had my
Yeah.
time with it, and
yeah.
it's doing its
a
life out there,
transition, that,
which is
yeah.
beautiful. That it has its own life.
I think it's interesting. We'll wrap up soon because we gotta go eat some food. But it's in relation to like the sensation of contentment or discontentment or the potential addiction that oftentimes surrounds musicians and artists and people that are up on stage and being just like all of the attention's being poured on. That really legitimately becomes a drug for people.
That's the problem. Yeah,
And it's an interesting thing, the conflation of the messages from somebody like Ram Dass into the music sphere, because it's almost like it's like water and oil in a way, that's his. And what was nice about him was, I mean, they blend perfectly together, but that addictive part and you know, the renunciation of the attachment to all of that stuff that's kind of that's infused into everything that he's saying. Meanwhile, he's being completely humble and real that he's a human being, he goes through all the same stuff.
yeah,
But it's a really fascinating blend. It's kind of like the analog and digital
yeah,
connection in a way. It's
Yeah.
really beautiful.
yeah. Never thought of it like that.
Should we wrap this piece up? You guys have anything else you'd like to share with each other?
Well, the album's called Music for Psychedelic Therapy, John's new album, and the song's called Sit Around the Fire that we've been referencing. Sit Around the Fire is currently out, and the
Yeah.
album's November 12th.
And I would also point people towards the video for Sit Around the Fire on
Yes.
YouTube, which is a thing of extraordinary beauty. It's the animated pages of Be Here Now. It's just incredible.
Would it be possible to incorporate at least parts, if not all of Sit Around the Fire into this, or parts or whatever?
As far as I'm
We-
concerned, I don't
Okay.
know.
We can talk about it after
I think it'd be fine. But we should also talk about the fact that you have it. I don't know when is this coming out?
The next 3 weeks.
Okay. So my album's out November the 12th, and he also has an album called In, which is coming out.
Yeah.
Is this actually announceable? I don't know.
It's called In a Soundtrack for a soundtrack for the psychedelic practitioner. I get it confused with each of our titles, but they're basically of the same intention to guide
Right.
psychedelic journey.
Cool.
And we were just independently making these at the same time. So
Sweet.
it's a sign of the time.
Collective unconsciously.
Something's in the
yeah.
air
Yeah.
about maybe these things being needed as tools. So
How many hours is it?
it's 2.
Okay.
And it's a sort of a follow-up to the Music for Mushrooms album, which is 5 hours.
Yep.
But we ended up testing this album unexpectedly in ketamine sessions a lot because Radha's a ketamine therapist. So we just sort of had this laboratory to test it on a regular basis with other people. And it was born out of psilocybin ceremonies, so it works great for that. But it also happens to work really well for ketamine. And John's music, I'm sure, works well for many medicines, but we know it works well for ketamine.
Yeah, mine was born through DMT experiences, but it's been primarily tested through ketamine by me.
What do you mean born through DMT experiences?
So the music is literally wouldn't sound anything like that without the DMT experiences I had. So I've had many of them over the last 6 years, and it's kind of stopped now. I don't feel the need anymore, or the desire, to be honest. But there's a sound that I associate with the feeling of DMT, and that's what I've tried in my way to bring onto this record.
Mm.
And when you hear the first track, if you've had DMT, there may be a part of you that goes, "Oh yeah," I don't know.
I think that's the value. One of like the many values of the artist in culture is to be able to go into those introspective, meta, invisible, ineffable realms. And be able to interpret that into something that we can, the rest of culture is able to chew on.
Well, yeah, because interestingly, if you were to try and describe the DMT experience with words, you can write some beautiful poetry, but I feel like sound is better by a very, very, very long way at depicting the ineffable, ridiculous magic of that experience.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You could say the same thing about conversation.
You could.
Just presence with somebody.
Yeah.
When you start getting wrapped up in the words, and I can even notice it in this conversation or any conversation, sometimes I'll get too sciencey or too wordy or too like, okay, I have my preformed, prefabricated concept or idea, like boom, and I'll like send that packet over to you or send that packet over to you. And then, you have your interpretation of that packet. But I think collectively, sounds and colors and art and all that, they're highly viable forms of communication.
Hell yeah.
I mean, that's why it's a part of human nature. It's like we were not supposed to just be limited to words and writing. It was always the whole thing: visual spectrum, the audio spectrum, and the sensory spectrum. Touch and all these things.
So I wonder if it has something to do with we want to see each other. So we interpret, we talk about our feelings. But then we also have these other skills where maybe we'll play like a piano song and like pour our emotions and thoughts and then we'll send it to a girl, or write out in poetry or paint something. Yeah, but I mean, ultimately it probably winds back as just some other translation or interpretation to be seen. Yeah, yeah. All modalities, these things are there for when words aren't enough, and that's what music and sound in particular is just for me the most powerful.
Yeah, it's a way to talk about the things you can't talk about, the ineffable, the mystery.
Particularly instrumental music.
Eric Davis said the mystery has no edge, and I love that phrase because that's what music and art is able to do is dance around that edge. It's the mystery itself, this non-duality. You can never just put your finger on it. That's the point. And mystery has this great way of like encompassing that whole thing, and you know it through feeling, not by ideas, and that's music's just such a great mechanism that way.
And then if you're a person that's able to create some type of translation to be seen in a deeper way, other people are able to also process that, and I think they reciprocally can feel that.
Well, yeah, because like I said, we're all human beings. We all feel this. That's what's so cool about music too. Is like we all respond to it almost universally. Yeah.
Shit's deep.
Indeed.
Good concluding note. Notes on the meeting.
Shit's deep. Yeah. That's the top feeling, not by.
I think they reciprocally can feel that.
Well, yeah, because like I said, we're all human beings. We all feel this. That's what's so cool about music too. Is like we all respond to it almost universally. Yeah.
Shit's deep.
Indeed.
Good concluding note. Notes on the meeting.
Shit's deep. Yeah. That's the title of the podcast. Shit's deep.
Thank you guys so much.
Yeah, thanks. It was great. Really
Thanks, brother.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And the Ram Dass album is, I've listened to literally hundreds of hours of that. I know
Yeah,
you're
and
not
shout out
promoting
to
it right now.
Ram Dass. I mean, that's where all this was born from, and him
That's
saying.
where I was introduced to you. Ram Dass
Yeah.
has been someone that I've listened to like thousands and thousands of hours. I listen to him almost every night before going to bed.
Ah,
I turn
yeah,
on,
I
like,
mean-
auto timer thing. He's been one of the most inspirational characters in my life.
Well, this talk that's featured in "Sit Around the Fire," that song, is from 1975, and I had only used Ram Dass talks from present time when we met up. I had never taken a dive into his catalog, and this was a really special one. Like, he's just really, really tapped in a heart-centered space. So it's one of the best I've ever heard of the energy of his talk.
Yeah.
You know?
As soon as you hear that first line,
Yeah, Go hear "Sit Around the Fire" if you haven't heard. Watch the video on YouTube.
Dope.
Yeah.
All right.
You'll be grateful. Take the 8 minutes or,
Mm.
or 9 minutes and just give a little space for it.
Mm.
That's
Cool.
my prescription.
East demands attention.
Invites. So we're not victims of the music.
He demands
my
attention of his
victims. Don't be my victims. Yeah.
All right. Thank you guys so much. I
Cool.
appreciate this.
Thanks,
We're
man.
all hungry. Time to go down. Thank you all for tuning in. And that's it. That's all. Over now.
All right.
Days ago.
Yeah,
Congratulations.
thank you. I survived for 40 years.
Yeah,
So I accept your congratulations.
Joan, I don't know if you want to talk about this, but let's see. You turned 40
Yeah, I don't mind.
a few days ago.
Yeah,
Congratulations.
thank you. I survived for 40 years.
Yeah,
So I accept your congratulations.
What's special?
I
Turning
don't
40.
really. I think it's quite arbitrary. I've never really cared. Well, no. When I was a kid, I cared about birthdays because it's about, the presents, what you could be given, and like what computer game I could get, whatever. But since I've been an adult, I don't really care about them because what if humans had decided to make 11 the important unit of time? Then 44 would be the important birthday, not 40. It's completely arbitrary. It doesn't mean anything. I like to celebrate the end of the year, like the winter solstice. For me, that's like the ending of a year and the beginning of a new year. Birthday for me is like, it's not really a thing. So I actually did 4 shows in a row, 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th August, which completely eclipsed the whole birthday thing. Because, I'm glad I'm still alive. So.
Yeah. Why? Did you have a hard life or?
No, a great
so-
life. But, I just don't understand the need to celebrate that particular milestone,
That could be that you were really into 30, 40, 50, 20. I don't know. Some people are really looking forward or not.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of, I enjoy my life. I enjoy all the, every year as each new one joins, but I don't really attach any importance to the actual birthday.
So do you actually plan your life in years then? Like you say, the sort of normal eclipse of winter ends and then...
I wouldn't say I plan my life at all, actually. But it's funny, I like to use... As I got older, I would say the one benefit... The thing is, I like being older. That's the thing. I like being 40 so far, and I liked being 30. 20s were confusing, and you get like bogged down in the wrong stuff. You don't understand what's important, and you get very, I think, distracted from your true self. And as you get older, I think, ideally you come into that true self. And I find that intuition is maybe the greatest power we have, and just like this idea of that thought that comes to you before you've analysed anything. That's probably the one. That's probably the way to go. And I've approached work like that for the last, 10 years maybe. And before then, it was a little bit more about what I thought might work on an intellectual level, or on an analytical level, what I thought might get me somewhere, or what I thought might make me look cool in the eyes of people I wanted to impress or whatever. And that, as I've got older, has just kind of faded away, and now I'm just like, this is the music I want to make. And this most recent album is a good example of something made with integrity, not really caring if people like it or not. You know, having some quite new agey themes that you could, that are maybe vulnerable to being, I don't know, satirized. I just don't care because it's the music I wanted to make, and I feel that's the gift that comes with being a bit older.
You said 10 years ago, for example, 10 or 12 years ago. What triggered that? Your shift more into intuition.
I think learning to meditate properly, and learning various forms of mindfulness, and just having a lot of interesting conversations and getting a lot of influence from other people, you know, meeting the right people at the right times. But having a meditation practice brings you to a sort of neutral point every day in which you are, when you come out of the meditation, you're able to see quite clearly that maybe something you've spent your time thinking about or worrying about actually doesn't matter. So you're able to step away from that, you know, and go, okay, so this deeper feeling I had, the intuition that I was hiding with the ego bullshit that I was thinking about, that was guiding my behavior, actually, let's go back to the intuition. So, I mean, I would attribute it to that.
But there must have been some sort of something that catalyzed it. Do you know what? Or?
Well, I mean,
now you're shifting more into meditation and finding.
Yeah, I mean, I think most people learn these kind of techniques if they feel a need to learn them. I don't think they learn them because everything is fine in their life and they just want to improve. It's usually because they're, like in my case, it's because I was having real trouble sleeping. So I was touring a lot, and I thought, okay, I had meditated in various forms for many years, but I didn't have a committed practice, twice a day practice, until I learned transcendental meditation, which has more structure. You know, you're supposed to do it twice a day, and you do. So I learned it maybe partly to combat insomnia, but I believe on a deeper level that, you know, my subconscious had loftier ideas and was trying to guide me towards this practice because it informs everything you do. So, yeah, you learn it for quite a mundane reason, like I'm tired, I need more rest, and I want to calm down. But actually you end up with all these other benefits, like I'm happier, more patient, I'm not in a bad mood when I'm on tour anymore, I don't rely on props as much as I used to, like, you know, whatever it is, whatever thing makes you happy in the short term, you have this kind of inner centeredness, which it's a nice thing.
What did it bring you music-wise?
I think it allowed me to express ideas musically without worrying so much about how they would be received, which sounds like a cliched idea of what you might want as a musician, but it's really important because when you start out, there's so much ego involved, and you don't have any confidence, and yeah, you might have flashes of, well, this is just really for me. I can't talk for anyone else, but because obviously there are some people that write their best albums when they're young. But for me, it's been a gradual process of integrating the ego nonsense with my true self and like trying to bring that out into the music, and that stuff just does take time.
But did your music also change?
I think so. I mean, to me it sounds different, and it sounds deeper, and it sounds more connected. But you know, it's hard for me to judge it.
No, but I mean, if you look back yourself, maybe I don't know, sound-wise, how you make it, how you create it, how you.
Yeah, I mean that stuff's always changing.
Yeah.
Because I mean, with every album I make, I would say I change 2 or 3 key things within the studio. So I'll get a new instrument, or I'll change workstation over. I mean, I found something I love now with Ableton, which is a very creative platform. And I'll try and occasionally restrict myself by saying, I'm not going to use this thing that I used a lot before. It doesn't usually work. So I said I wasn't going to use so much piano, and then I remembered that I'm a pianist. So that's a ridiculous idea. But like, you know, I think, again, intuition comes into it. If you feel you need something new, because, you know, sometimes you bring in a new synth and you play it and you're like, a melody comes out that would not have come out on the stuff you had already. But other times you can bring in new stuff and you get lost in trying to learn how to use the thing in the first place, or you get lost in the tedium of technology. So there's a balance in there that's important to find.
With this in hindsight, with this in mind, when you were 12, you started studying the piano. As a kid, and I think 12 years you're still young.
Yeah.
Were you then also more studying the piano with your intuition?
No, so I mean, I started playing when I was more like 4 or 5, and this was all intuition. And I was improvising, and that's all I did. And I thought, this is all I want to do. But then my parents, luckily now I can see, were like, no, you should have lessons. So I started having lessons age of 7, and then at 12 I went to Royal College of Music and had more serious lessons. And it wasn't until then that I actually thought, this is maybe a potential career, because I really enjoyed this. I had this amazing young teacher, and she was like, it's like a 26-year-old Australian piano, like a genius herself on the piano, really amazing. And she inspired me to want to get very seriously into the piano. So I did 4 or 5 years maybe of taking that very seriously. But you're still expressing other people's music, and it's not, I don't know, for me, the fact with electronic music, yeah, I still use the piano, but electronic music, you're creating the instrument. You're not just creating the melodies, you're actually making the sonic universe that people can then inhabit. And that to me is unbeatable. But yeah, I mean, you know, when I write a piano piece these days, which I still do, it's just a process of miking the piano really nicely and sitting there and letting that intuition come through and hopefully landing on something which deserves to exist.
What I was thinking sometimes, when you grow up being a kid, then you're more into your intuition, and then when you grow up, it all disappears more or less. And like you were saying, maybe 20 years and 30 years, then it more comes back, hopefully.
Yeah.
So I was thinking, well, maybe how you enjoyed the piano when you were a kid, was it also based on that intuition that you're talking about now?
It was amazing. It was amazing. I remember like the first time I remember playing, and like, so when I was about 4 or 5 years old, it's the first time I was actually in the same room as a piano, and you know, I had the opportunity to go and not play it, because obviously I didn't know how to play it, but I remember just going, I was in a friend's house, I just went over and played a note, and just hearing the way the note evolved over time and how the harmonics kind of morphed from one area to another, and just thinking, obviously at that age not knowing why I found that interesting, but looking back on it, I remember the sound of it and thinking, this is just mesmerizing to me, and then gradually just starting to figure out what sounded good. Yeah, it was magical, but then nothing beat the magic of getting my first electronic instruments, my first synths, and first, you know, like a home keyboard or whatever. You know, and hearing electronic music for the first time was the most exciting thing of all.
What was it?
Sorry?
What was the...
What was it? It was, I can't remember the exact piece, but it was like, it would have been 1986 or 7, and I was, like 6, 7 years old. And I remember it really just being what was available on the radio at the time. There's no internet, so you hear what is being played. And I remember Crockett's theme by Jan Hammer, just hearing that and being like, wow, that's cool. And the Pet Shop Boys, you know, and Depeche Mode, and you know, and whatever like early acid house was somehow finding its way into the charts around then, or maybe 88, 89. Things which were using samplers and things which were sequenced just generally, like Bomb the Bass and Mars, Pump Up the Volume, things like that, these were new technologies that were appearing in music, and yeah, it was pretty exciting.
So what, say ego stuff.
Yeah.
For you, we're talking now, and I see a whole, logical line with how you evolved. But then the ego stuff, you worked with Coldplay, and you worked on that huge hit album. Mm-hmm. Was it also intuition for you? Was it something that you really...
No, it was, because, I mean, people like to criticize mainstream, I know you're not, but people like to criticize mainstream bands, but actually working with them in particular, it's like, these are people that love music. These are people that work only with people they like and have a great relationship with each other and take it very, very seriously and work so much harder than other people. That's the thing. People you can look at the finished product and go, oh, can laugh at it, whatever. For various, if you're kind of not open to the genre, but like the work that goes into those releases, the months, even years sometimes, it's so impressive. And you know, Brian Eno brought me into that situation, and I was in that privileged position of having met him, and him being the one brought in to produce that record. And I was allowed the opportunity to sit in a room, you know, on a couple of floors up from where the main action was going on, and just take audio from what was going on downstairs and do my thing with it. And then Chris would come up and hear it, and he'd be like, I love this bit, let's use that bit, or I don't, you know, that bit doesn't really do it for me, whatever. So absolutely, you know, might not use everything I did, but what they did use was all done with integrity. Yeah.
What did you learn from that while working with them? You said that they work really hard. What did you learn? What did you pick from it and use it for your own albums?
Well, I think I have huge admiration for that songwriting skill that Chris has and that the band have. And I think I learned about being ruthless with what you don't allow onto a record. Being really ruthless and just like no self-indulgence, no song should ever last longer than it needs to, all that sort of stuff. I mean, you may listen to what I do now and go, well, you make quite a lot of 12-minute songs, but in my opinion, they need to be that long to make their point. And I'm actually, even with those really long tracks, I'm equally ruthless. So quality control, you know, I don't want there to be a wasted song on a record. I think it's I like to take that really seriously. I don't want to put a filler on there. I don't want to make it not a minute longer than it should be.
When I speak to artists, then sometimes when we look back on previous albums and they say, well, it was me back then, and if I hear it now, then they say, well, that could be better, this could be better. How do you look back on your previous work? Is it say well, it stands the test of time, it's really good, or it's...
I mean, some of it yes, some of it no. I think I probably have the same reaction as the ones you're giving as examples. So like there are some tracks on my first album, which I wrote most of when I was 19 and 20, where I'm like, I really like those melodies, I like those chord sequences. I don't really like any of the drum programming because that's what tends to date electronic music. I think it's the rhythms and the drum programming. So I look back at that, and the second album in particular, I just think this is like, you need to react to your early stuff to make your new stuff. So I reacted to my first two albums thinking this is like, it all felt a bit clean and pristine and accurate and a little lifeless, and then I took a long gap after the second one and made my first one for Domino in 2009, and that is where I started doing things which I'm still proud of more. Like, I don't like all of it, but there are tracks on there which I think I'll always be proud of.
Were those tracks written prior to your work with Coldplay or after?
At the same time, exactly the same time. 2007, 2008, yeah.
So,
but I took my time over that record, Insides. I took maybe 3 or 4 years because I was doing so much production for other people and collaborations that I didn't have time to sit there and write in the way that I do these days, just to focus on one thing.
And since then it's been also 4 or 5 year gaps.
Yeah.
Do you constantly work then on new material, or is it just
not really? No, I tend to do. I mean, the thing is that I don't work when I'm touring because I can't. My studio is a physical. You know, there's synths at home, there's a piano. I don't really work with soft synths. So what I tend to do is like the last 3 albums has been, you do the tour for a year, 2 years. In this case, 2 years plus. And in that time, kind of not really writing new stuff. I do the odd remix here and there. But I mean, this is almost kind of a necessity because, like I say, I can't really do it when I'm traveling. But I also, like, the positive side effect of that is that it means that when I do start to write again, my tastes have shifted. My interests have moved forward and my influences are different artists and whatever. And I think that's important. Otherwise, you write the same rubbish that you just did before.
But do you know when you're working on new material what has shifted? Or afterwards, once you've finished the product and you hear it and say, hey...
It's usually that. Although while I'm doing it, I'm thinking, I'm always analysing it and thinking, because I follow instinct only. But if it doesn't cause a certain level of excitement in me, then I won't be able to find sufficient energy to even finish it.
So in hindsight, your last album, Singularity,
Yeah.
what influenced it?
I think a lot of the things we've talked about, meditation was a big part of it. The people I've met, the experiences I've had, I lived in California for a bit, so I was able to experience some proper wilderness and some landscapes, the scale of which don't exist in, England, where I'm from. So at the time, you're just kind of writing music, and you're not really thinking, this is why I'm writing it. But yeah, looking back, it's about expansiveness and a feeling of space and a feeling of trying to get whatever perspective you can get from nature and from it all sounds so cliche when you say it out loud, but cliches are often cliches for a reason. If you lie in the desert staring up at the sky and see a billion stars, you're going to feel rightly small. You're going to be hit by this realization that you're just a tiny thing, and your problems are meaningless really in the grand scheme of things. And that for me is a healthy feeling, and I wanted to try and translate that into an album. I think it would be very hard if you wrote lyrics, because how do you make that not sound like cheesy or ridiculous? But if you're doing it with just sound, I feel like you can try and translate those ideas. So yeah.
And is it for you then we talked about the ego stuff? The meditation came into this last album more, and also like you said, the landscapes and the wideness. But the need for you to express yourself.
Yeah.
What is that need?
I mean, that's the eternal question about any artist, is like, why are they so driven to do this? And most artists would do it for free, would do it whether they got a living out of it or not. You might
do you know now why?
Well, I can't answer it from a personal perspective, but I can answer it from a psychotherapy perspective, because I've talked about this with a lot of people, and I think the theory amongst those that are technically trained in the workings of the mind is that it's a sublimation of trauma. So you've been through something when you're very young, you may not remember what it is. In my case, I really don't. But very often, apparently, or maybe there's something about the world that doesn't quite sit right with you, and you need to process it by making art. So it's not a career choice; it's a way of life. It's a way of living, and I can't answer it from a personal perspective, but I can answer it from a psychotherapy perspective, because I've talked about this with a lot of people, and I think the theory amongst those that are technically trained in the workings of the mind is that it's a sublimation of trauma. So you've been through something when you're very young, you may not remember what it is. In my case, I really don't. But very often, apparently, or maybe there's something about the world that doesn't quite sit right with you, and you need to process it by making art. So it's not a career choice; it's a way of life. It's a way of living, and it's not. When it works for you, it's the most deep, powerful, beautiful euphoria. And when it doesn't work, you feel like everything is shit or meaningless. So it's a strange life, but I would still choose it over anything.
Last question, and what makes it extra special for you that people come to your show and listen to it and like it?
It is actually amazing, just the journey that the whole project has been on. For 18 years of releasing music, to go from playing in a pub to like 4 people who didn't know what they were even watching, to playing a show tonight to like 9,000 people, whatever. It's intensely meaningful to me, but not because I feel like it validates me, but because I feel like the music that's being performed is being enjoyed, and that music comes from, it doesn't feel like it comes from me. It feels like it's like I'm a sort of vessel that it channeled through, but it feels like it comes from these places that meditation allows you to access. So it feels like we're all sharing this part of consciousness, which is it's a beautiful thing to be in the middle of. Yeah.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Loud and Quiet presents Midnight Chats.
Bye.